Why are we tolerating any of this nonsense, right? So you may remember that a couple of months ago, the Supreme Court in Britain, which is a nonsense entity anyway, decided to back the biological definition of woman. So this the campaign group Women for Scotland argued that sex-based protection should only apply to people that are born female, and the judges on this court were like, yeah, I guess it probably is the case. Like, yes, that's what sex-based protections are for, people who are females, and conversely, people who are males if we should happen to need them. So this seems to be a triumph for common sense, and really, it's hard to think of what the argument against is going to be. As in, what exactly is the reason that we would allow men to enter into women's spaces? Well, one transformer judge called Victoria MacLeod is going to challenge this at the ruling of the European Court. So, why? Who cares? I mean, what was Brexit about if not to have to not care about these things? But anyway, they claim that the court had failed to consider human rights arguments that would have been put by trans people, and the judgment had left her feeling with the legal nonsense of being two sexes at once. Okay, well, I've got some bad news about that. But anyway, you didn't change your sex, even if you changed the legal convention or fiction of your gender. So why that's being conflated, I don't know. But the point being, I'm afraid that your biological sex is something that is immalleable. You cannot change it. This is something that you are born with, that you will carry for your entire life, and you just have to live with it. And because of the nature of the differences between men and women, it is imperative that they have some spaces away from one another. Now, it's a much larger conversation about men needing space away from women, which of course I've had on this channel, but the point being, in an immediate sense, and not just for their psychological well-being, women need for their safety spaces away from men. And so you would think, right, okay, well, even if you were a person who believed they were in fact born in the wrong body or any other such metaphysically confused nonsense, they would be able to accept, well, yeah, it probably has to be the case that in some areas of life, we just have to have women's only spaces that are reserved for people who are biologically female, as in were born female, grew up into women, and were never at one point a man or a boy, and were not biologically male. Again, this all seems very straightforward, right? This seems, why am I even saying this? Well, because notice the crux of the objection. Well, the court had failed to consider human rights arguments that would have been put forward by trans people. Okay, they also failed to consider whether the earth was flat, or whether maybe it was hollow, and maybe had Tartaria contained within it, or that dinosaurs were actually only 6,000 years old, or other things that are so self-evidently and patently not true that they don't really need to be brought up. Human rights arguments are not arguments about reality. They're arguments about a legal fiction that doesn't make sense applied to this subject. Doesn't matter if you feel a certain way. What matters is the biological reality is that men should not be allowed access to women's spaces. This is not anything that you can legislate away, because you will always have men who will take advantage of this because they are incentivized to do so, because it's going to be for whatever, I don't even want to get into the reasons that they're incentivized to do so. But anyway, so this former judge went on Good Morning Britain, and I just want to play a part from it and talk about it, because it's just remarkable that we are entertaining this. This, I mean, literally file it, and whoever the judge of the case just be like, no, that's a nonsense argument. I'm obviously not taking that. Move on. Move on from this. Anyway, let's watch this.
Making any points.
And what do you say to those behind the legal action, of course, and presumably to those in the survey, who say you may be able to say that you have changed your sex, but you have not changed your biological sex?
Notice how gently Susanna is presenting this. So you want us to play along with your fantasy, and you know that that hasn't actually been done. So what's your response to people who are like, I don't want to play along with your fantasy?
And therefore, for instance, if you're playing in a football match, there are biological factors that come with being born a man.
Yes, I mean, and in this country for the last 20 years, the law has been that if it's not fair, then a trans person can be excluded. So there's nothing.
But is that the law, though? I mean, why is it that Leah Thomas had to go through a long legal battle to be told that they are in fact born male and therefore cannot compete with the women? Like, why has it been the case that we've seen multiple examples of women's trophies being taken by men? This is obviously not just cut and dried. Well, it's the law. It's got to be fair, and so you can exclude trans people. That no, the Human Rights Act. It's all non-discriminatory, and so actually, this has been a long-running thing for the women's campaigners to get to this point where they're actually saying, no, hang on a second, it doesn't make sense that we allow men who were actually really bad at the thing to become number one in the women's sport, because this seems to obviously be a way of people who are not being entirely honest at getting ahead. It doesn't seem just to deny women things that they have worked hard for because someone else is going to take advantage of the fact that everyone is going to play along with their fantasy. They're going to pretend that this is the case, and so these people can take advantage of that. That's not on, is it? It's not fair.
Nothing new in this. But it's case by case. I'm 8 stone. I don't have the muscles of a man. Most female footballers would make mincemeat of me. But some people are bigger than others. And I entirely agree that you shouldn't have situations where any woman is in some sense at risk, or which is unfair.
But can you...
Right, so we shouldn't have situations in which women can be put at risk. I agree. And the only way to prevent that is to make sure that men are not able to claim that they are women, just again, on a whim, arbitrarily. Just, right, I'm a woman now, put me in the women's prison. I mean, this was the issue that sunk Nicola Sturgeon and her premiership of Scotland, because literally a trans rapist, a man, was being put in a women's prison, and she was like, well, I kind of have to agree with it due to liberal doctrinal reasons. It's like, but this is nonsense. And this is obviously just a bad actor taking advantage of this nonsense. And so to prevent the bad actors from taking advantage of this nonsense, we have to have it done on objective standards. As in, if you're born a male, you go in the male's prison. Again, this, like, I shouldn't have to talk about this, but there we go. This is where we are in Britain at the moment.
You see how that has happened. I mean, we've seen those cases in Scotland.
Cases, yes.
You know, criminals then transitioning and saying, I'm a woman, and going into a female prison.
I mean, my experience as a judge, I mean, I was involved in writing guidelines for judges, and I know that the guidance there...
this explains a lot about our judges, right?
Is that, you know, if you get some rapist who turns up at court saying, despite having been Bob all his life, turns up and says, hello, I'm Julie today, he's probably just lying, because bad people lie.
Oh, do they? Right, okay. And so to guarantee that the bad people's lies aren't believed by a gullible rubes who are completely on board with gender ideology, for example, maybe we should have it so that they just aren't allowed to go into the women's prison so they can continue attacking people, right? That seems to be the most sensible way of dealing with this. In fact, again, why do I even have to have this discussion? Like, obviously, we're not going to let men lie their way into women's prisons, and the easiest way to do that is by not taking any chances of it. If you were born male, you don't go into the women's prison. It's that simple, isn't it? If you were born male, you don't get to compete in the Women's Olympics. It's that simple, isn't it? But no, you want to carve out an exception which actually does create the potential for a danger for women, for personal reasons, for frankly selfish reasons, reasons that I really don't agree with and think are kind of nonsense.
And they're called trans, I think, by people labelling them as trans, and they...
Oh yeah, well, the thing is, the problem with the labelling issue is they can call themselves trans anytime they want, and you've got no grounds on which to refuse it. I mean, what you can do, appeal to an objective standard. You can't tell them they're not trans. And so if they realize that the word trans is the magic word that gets the male rapist into the women's prison, he'll just be like, oh, wait, I think I'm trans. Oh, thank you for accepting this obvious truth about me. And because you've got absolutely no way to determine whether I'm lying or not, or whether I'm a bad person or not. I mean, the fact that they're a rapist, you would kind of think would qualify him as being a bad person by default. But no, this is something that this person, Victoria McLeod, wants us to have to consider now. It's like, no, this is nonsense. None of this makes sense.
They call themselves trans, but doesn't make it true.
Doesn't make it true, indeed. But again, like, I don't think this is going to go anywhere. I think that she's going to get, is going to get the Leah Thomas treatment. But the point is, you can see just how unbelievably lost Britain has become, and it's taken a huge amount of work for a lot of people to get the most commonsensical positions just established again. And man, watching like people like Keir Starmer go, well, the Supreme Court has provided clarity now. Well, now we know what a woman is. It's like, okay, so up until that point, you thought a certain percentage of women had penises. The Supreme Court says it, and now they don't. And so you're just like, right, okay, well, there we go. Job done. That's that problem solved. I don't need to think about this anymore. It's like, look, we're just opening up the gates, the doors, to people who are bad, doing bad things, obviously, but also people who possibly need help, not getting the help they need. And I kind of feel that this is one of those examples.